everybody. I'm glad you could join me today. Right off the bat, let's address the elephant in the room here. I had rotator cuff surgery this week, so this is going to be part of me for the next 6 weeks. But without any further ado, let's get into why we came. So what's the deal with God ignoring all the evil and corruption in a decaying world? Or is he? And we're going to look into that today by diving into the fascinating and thought-provoking world of the book of Habakkuk. A compelling piece from the Old Testament. It kind of runs like a heartfelt conversation between a struggling prophet and God. Imagine it as a dialogue that explores the deepest questions about faith, justice, and changes of living in a world that often seems chaotic and unjust. Habakkuk lived during a turbulent time in Israel's history, specifically during the last days of the southern kingdom. Now picture this, the nation was grappling with rampant injustice, was drifting into idolatry. Amidst this backdrop, Habakkuk found himself staring down the barrel of an emerging threat, the fierce Babylonian Empire. Now he was a prophet of the Lord, and while most prophets were quick to point fingers at Israel's people, calling them out for their sins, well, Habakkuk took a different approach. Instead of directing his words at the people, he directed them at God. When you read his book, you can almost feel his desperation as he pours out his heart, grappling with the grief and the sorrow. He questions how a good and loving God could allow such evil and suffering to exist. I'm reading now from Habakkuk 1, 2 through 3. O Lord, how long shall I cry for help, and you will not hear? Or cry to the violence, and you will not save? Why do you make me see inequity? And why do you idly look at wrong? Destruction and violence are before me. Strife and contention arise. Now in the first 2 chapters, we witness this intense back and forth between Habakkuk and God. Habakkuk's business challenge is that life in Israel has descended into chaos. The teachings of the Torah are being ignored, resulting in widespread violence and grave injustice. All while corrupt leaders turn a blind eye, Habakkuk cries out, urging God to step in and make a change. And what does God say in response? Well, he informs Habakkuk that he is indeed aware of the corruption and that he plans to summon the fearsome armies of Babylon to bring justice to Israel. Now, this certainly takes old Habakkuk by surprise. Say what? Babylon is even worse than we are, he says. They're more corrupt, more violent, and they treat people like mere pawns in their quest for power. Habakkuk is baffled. They treat humans like animals, gathering them up like fish on hooks, and they devour nations and people groups in order to build their own empire. He wonders how a holy God can use such a corrupt nation to fulfill God's holy purposes, and he demands an explanation. In his frustration, he positions himself like a watchman on the city walls, waiting eagerly for an explanation. And then when God finally responds, well, he instructs Habakkuk to write down the vision he receives, one that reveals a future plan. God assures him that while his plan may seem slow to materialize, it is certain to come to pass. And those who remain faithful will live by that hope. Now imagine God is emphasizing that the cycle of violence and oppression created by nations like Babylon will inevitably lead to their own downfall. God assures Habakkuk that just because he might temporarily use a wicked nation like Babylon to fulfill his justice, it doesn't mean he condones their actions. God's judgment rests upon all nations. Woe to those that act unjustly. Now, as God elaborates on his plan, he highlights 5 major forms of injustice that corrupt nations follow. The first 2 deal with financial exploitation. Wealthy individuals charging outrageous interest to keep the poor in a cycle of debt and gaining wealth through the dishonest means. Often using forced labor, these nations treat people worse than animals, leveraging fear to maintain control. Then there's the shocking indulgence of leaders who prioritize their pleasure over the suffering of their people, celebrating with parties while the populace struggles. And finally, the idolatry that fuels these nations turns money, power, security into false gods, enslaving their citizens to the empire's ambitions. But here's the kicker. This isn't just Babylon's problem. It's part of a broader human condition that many nations fall prey to over time. In fact, the lessons that God shared with Habakkuk resonate through generations, reaching anyone grappling with similar turmoil in their own nation. Hey, look around you. You see it here? Yet Habakkuk isn't done. He's not quite satisfied. His heartfelt plea to God echoes, will this cycle of rise and fall among corrupt empires ever end? He longed for God to act now, like he did in the past. What follows is a gripping depiction of God's power, with dark clouds, fire, earthquakes, signaling his imminent confrontation with evil. When God steps into the scene, you know he's about to draw attention to the unrighteousness that has plagued humanity. He draws comparisons to the Exodus story from the past, where he split the sea in a battle against Pharaoh. Just as he brought judgment against the oppressor back then, he will confront the Babylonians and all other wicked nations. The voice and hope intertwine, assuming that while evil may seem overwhelming, God will ultimately protect his people, foreshadowing the coming of an anointed one. Now, that's sort of reference to a king from the line of David, Jesus. Now, in this light, the old Exodus transforms into a powerful image of future salvation, where God will rise again, defeat the evils of this world, and rescuing the oppressed and granting justice to all. Habakkuk wraps up his book with a resonating note of hope and praise. Even when life throws hardships our way, whether through drought, war, famine, he chooses to trust in a faith-filled joy. In the end, the story stands as a brilliant reminder of how the righteous choose to live by faith, recognizing that even in challenging times, God's overreaching love and commitment to justice will prevail. So there you have it. The essence of Habakkuk, a tale of wrestling with profound moral struggles, eternal hope, and the assurance that in the end, God's goodness will shine through the darkness. Resist the temptation to despair. Remember, even amidst chaos, faith is a powerful guide. Now, even in the Old Testament, salvation lies in faith, not acts, not the law, but trust in the Lord, faith. So until next week, happy trails to you until we meet again.